The champagne glass was still in my hand when my wife's fingers closed around my wrist. Not a tap, a grip. The kind you use when a car is about to run a red light, and someone you love is standing in the crosswalk. "We have to go," Margaret whispered, her lips barely moving, her eyes fixed on something over my shoulder. "Right now? Don't turn around yet." I felt the ice in my glass shift, water beating down onto my fingers. Somewhere behind me, my son was laughing. That big, easy laugh he'd had since he was 6 years old. But underneath it, threaded through the party noise like a wire through cake, I heard another voice say a name. My name. And then it said something else. Something that made my wife's grip tighten until it hurt. My name is Walter Hensley. I'm 63 years old, and for 31 years I ran a commercial HVAC supply company out of a cinder block building in Dayton, Ohio, that I bought for $40,000 with a loan co-signed by my father-in-law, because no bank would touch me on my own. I built that company from 3 trucks to 41. When I sold it 18 months ago, the number on the wire transfer was $6.2 million. Not because I was brilliant, because I showed up at 5 a.m. for 3 decades and never once missed a payroll, even in 2009 when I mortgaged our house to make it happen. My son, Derek, was 34. He'd never worked for me, by his choice, and honestly, by mine too. I wanted him to build something of his own. When he told Margaret and me he'd found the one, a marketing consultant named Priya, who ran her own agency, I was cautiously thrilled. When he told us they were buying a house in the Oakwood Hills, a $1.4 million house, I asked, gently, how a 34-year-old marketing consultant and a 36-year-old man managing investment properties could afford that. Derek smiled and said, "Dad, we've got it handled." That party, the one where my wife's hand found my wrist, was the housewarming. 40 guests, a hired bartender, string lights over a stone patio that cost more than my first company truck. I didn't know yet that handled meant something had already gone terribly wrong, and that it was about to become my problem too. Margaret pulled me gently toward the bar, angling us so I could see without turning fully. Derek stood near the pool with 3 of his college friends, a glass of something amber in his hand, his shirt open 1 button too many, the confidence of a man who has never once had a landlord raise the rent on him. "My old man," Derek was saying, loud enough now that the wire in the party noise became a shout. "He thinks this is his money. Like, he actually thinks because he wired us the down payment as a gift, he gets a say in anything." I told Priya, "Just let him feel important. Sign whatever he wants us to sign. We'll deal with the real paperwork after." One of his friends laughed. "Bro, that's cold." "It's business," Derek said, and clinked his glass against his friend's. "He'll never even read it. He trusts me. I had wired them $180,000 4 months earlier. Not a loan on paper. A gift at Derek's specific request, so there's no interest, no weirdness, just family helping family. I'd asked, once, gently, whether we should draw up something simple, just so everyone understood the terms. Derek had looked almost hurt. "Dad, it's a gift. You said so yourself. Why would we need paperwork between family?" I remembered signing the wire authorization. I remembered feeling proud. Standing there with a warm champagne glass sweating in my hand, I understood for the first time that pride and understanding are not the same thing, and that I had confused them. I didn't confront him that night. I smiled, complimented the kitchen island, and drove home in silence with Margaret's hand resting on my knee. The next morning, I called my accountant of 19 years, a careful man named Ron Filer, and asked him to quietly pull the title and closing documents on the Oakwood property. It took him 4 days. When he called back, his voice had the flat, careful tone he used only when something was wrong. "Walter, your $180,000 isn't listed as a gift on the closing disclosure," Ron said. "It's listed as a loan from you, secured with a second lien position, behind a $340,000 private loan from someone named Alan Getty. And Derek's name isn't on the title at all. It's Priya's solely." I sat very still in my study, the same chair I'd sat in the night I signed the papers to buy my first company truck. "Read that back to me," I said. He did. Twice. I invited Derek to lunch. Told him I wanted to talk business. "Your old business instincts might help me with something," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie, because watching him lie to my face was, in fact, teaching me quite a lot about business. I laid out what Ron had found, calmly, like I was asking about the weather. Derek didn't flinch. That was the part that hurt most. "Dad, that's just structuring," he said, waving his fork. "Priya's business credit is stronger than mine right now, so we put the title in her name for tax optimization purposes, pass-through liability shielding, basically. Your money's not a loan, it's just categorized that way for the lender's underwriting requirements. It protects you, actually. If anything ever happened, you'd have a claim." "And Alan Getty?" "Priya's business partner. He does bridge financing. It's totally standard, Dad. Everybody structures deals like this now." He smiled at me the exact way he'd smiled as a boy explaining why the neighbor's window was definitely already broken before he threw the ball. I nodded slowly and said, "That makes sense. Thank you for explaining it." I paid for lunch. I went home and called a real estate attorney that afternoon. The attorney, a sharp woman named Deborah Okafor, read the documents in 11 minutes and said, "Mr. Hensley, this isn't structuring. This is a second lien with no repayment schedule, no interest disclosure to you as the lien holder, and your son's name doesn't appear anywhere on this property. If Priya defaults or sells, you have no automatic standing. Whoever drafted this protected the buyer from you, not the other way around." "Who drafted it?" She flipped a page. "A firm called Getty and Okonkwo Title Services." "Getty. Same name as the bridge financing partner Derek mentioned." I drove to their office, told the receptionist I was a prospective client, and asked to see anyone available about a residential closing. A young man named Casey, eager and unguarded, pulled up general information on his screen while I waited, angled just enough for me to see the company letterhead, Getty and Okonkwo. Family owned since 2019. Founders, Alan Getty and Priya Okonkwo. Priya's business partner was her brother. I sat in my car in that parking lot for a long time. My son's fiancée and her brother had structured a deal where my $180,000 gift became a legal loan with no protections, secured a house solely in her name, run through her own family's title company, while telling me it was for tax optimization. And Derek had known. Derek had helped sell it to me over a plate of $34 short ribs. That night, I did something I am not proud of, and something I would do again without hesitation. I drove back to the Oakwood house at 9:40 p.m., parked 2 streets over, and walked to where I could see the kitchen through the back fence, where the string lights were still up from the party. Derek and Priya were at the island. Priya was laughing. "Your dad literally thanked you for explaining it," she said, delighted. "Babe, he thinks he understood. That's the best part. Alan structured it, so even if we split up, or sell, or anything, his money just evaporates unless we choose to give it back. He gave us $250,000, and he doesn't even own a doorknob in that house." Derek laughed too. He built a whole company out of nothing, and he can't read a title report. It's kind of sad, honestly. I stood in the dark behind their fence, 63 years old, and felt something in my chest go very quiet and very cold. I told Margaret everything the next morning. She didn't cry. She got up, made coffee, and said 4 words that I have thought about every day since. "Then let's be smart." We hired a forensic accountant, a former FBI financial crimes analyst named Diane Sue, and asked her to trace the full picture. Not just my $180,000, but Alan Getty's $340,000 bridge loan too. It took her 16 days. What she found was worse than a bad real estate deal. Alan Getty's title company had, over the past 3 years, run at least 11 similar transactions where family gifts were quietly converted into unsecured loans favoring one party, while the title company itself collected origination fees on both the property closing and the private loan, a conflict of interest that, depending on state disclosure law, sat somewhere between deeply unethical and outright fraudulent. 3 of the 11 families involved had already filed complaints with the State Real Estate Commission. 2 were in active litigation. My $180,000 wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was a fee-generating machine, and my son had walked me directly into it, smiling the whole way. I made a decision that week that I've never told anyone outside this story. I decided to become, on purpose, a confused old man. I started calling Derek more, my voice a little softer, a little slower than usual. "I don't really understand all this legal stuff, son," I'd say. "Your mother handles the bills mostly. I just want everyone to be happy." I let my shoulders round forward when I visited. I left my reading glasses conspicuously in my shirt pocket instead of on my face, so I'd have an excuse to squint at documents and ask Derek to just explain the important part. I stopped bringing up the house at all. Internally, I was doing something very different. Every "I don't understand" bought me another week of them not covering their tracks. Every soft, confused nod meant Priya kept talking freely in front of me, the way people do around someone they've decided is harmless. Margaret played her part too, the worried, deferential wife, always agreeing that your father gets confused sometimes. We'd drive home from those visits in total silence until we hit the highway, and only then would she say, quietly, "How much did you get today?" I wasn't losing my grip. I was loosening theirs. Diane helped me build the trap over 3 weeks. First, the bait. I told Derek I wanted to simplify things and asked him to help me set up a joint document. A simple memo, I said, listing the $180,000 as officially forgiven, no strings, so I could stop worrying about it for my own peace of mind. It was, on its face, exactly what a confused, guilt-softened old man would want. It was also, structurally, a document that, if signed and dated with specific language Deborah drafted, would create a clear evidentiary paper trail admitting the original transaction had been deliberately misrepresented to me. Second, the recording. Ohio is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was part of. I began carrying my phone in my breast pocket, screen dark, voice memo running, every single time I visited that house. Third, the confirmation. Diane flagged Alan Getty's title company to 2 of the 3 families already in litigation, connecting them with Deborah, who began quietly coordinating a joint complaint. I set a date. Derek and Priya's engagement dinner, 6 weeks out, hosted at our house, my house, at their request, because it means so much to have your blessing here, Dad. The week before the dinner, my phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Diane, texting, 2 more families found. Total exposure for Getty and Okonkwo now estimated over $2.1 million. State Commission has opened a formal file. This is bigger than we thought. I sat in the dark of my kitchen, phone glowing, and felt the old feeling I used to get the night before a big contract closed. Not anger anymore, just readiness. The engagement dinner was 22 people, seated at 2 long tables. Margaret and I had sat with the good china we'd bought in 1994. Derek stood to give a toast, glass raised. That same open-collar confidence from the housewarming. "To my dad," he said, grinning at the table, "who still doesn't totally understand what a lien is, bless him, but who's been so generous anyway. Some men build companies. My dad built confusion. But hey, it worked out great for us." The table laughed. Priya laughed loudest, raising her glass toward me like a toast, like a trophy. I stood up slowly, the way I'd been standing for weeks, a little stiff, a little uncertain, and the room quieted, expecting maybe a sentimental toast back. "I do understand liens, actually," I said. My voice didn't rise. It never needed to. "I understand this one very well. It's a second lien, subordinate to a $340,000 loan from Alan Getty, who is Priya's brother and co-owner of the title company that closed on this house. The same title company currently under review by the State Real Estate Commission for 11 similar transactions, 3 of which are already in litigation." The room went the particular kind of silent that has weight. I understand that my $180,000 gift was never entered as a gift. I understand Derek told me, over lunch, that it was structuring for tax optimization. I have that conversation recorded, along with a second conversation, in this house's own backyard, where Derek called my company, the one that put him through college, nothing, and where Priya said, quote, "He gave us $250,000 and doesn't even own a doorknob." I set my phone on the table, screen up, a paused waveform visible. Nobody reached for it. I understand, I continued, that 11 other families have been run through the exact same arrangement, and that 2 of them are represented by the same attorney I hired 6 weeks ago. Derek's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Dad, you don't. This isn't the place. You're right, I said. It's not. So let's make it simple. I reached into my jacket and took out the folded forgiveness memo, the one Derek had helped me draft, believing it erased his debt. I held it up so the table could see both signatures, then tore it once, cleanly, down the middle, and let both halves fall onto his empty dinner plate. That was never real forgiveness, I said. It was evidence. And as of Monday morning, it belongs to my attorney, the State Real Estate Commission, and, if Alan would like, the County Prosecutor's Financial Crimes Unit, who I understand has already been in contact with Diane Sue regarding pattern of fraud charges. I picked my champagne glass back up, the same kind I'd been holding the night this started, and set it down without drinking. I'm not confused, I said quietly. I just wanted to see how long you'd both keep talking. Within 11 days, the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office opened a formal inquiry into Getty and Okonkwo Title Services on pattern of fraud grounds tied to undisclosed dual-fee lien structuring. Alan Getty's real estate and title licenses were suspended pending investigation 3 weeks later. 2 additional families joined the civil suit, bringing total claimed damages past $2.4 million. Priya was not criminally charged. Investigators found no evidence she drafted the fraudulent terms herself, but she was named in the civil suit as a beneficiary of the structuring and dropped from her own marketing firm's largest client within a month after the story became a minor local news item. Local title company faces fraud probe over family gift loans. Derek and Priya's engagement ended 9 days after the dinner. He moved out of the Oakwood house in April, back into an apartment his mother and I did not pay for. I forgave one thing, publicly, and made sure everyone knew it. Casey, the young receptionist at Getty and Okonkwo who'd unknowingly shown me the letterhead that cracked the case, was about to lose his job when the firm's licenses were suspended. I called him myself, gave him a personal reference, and helped him land an entry-level compliance role at a title company 2 counties over, one Deborah vouched for personally. He had done nothing wrong. He deserved to land on his feet. It rained the night Derek came back, 5 months later. Not the dramatic kind of rain, just cold, steady, late October rain, the kind that gets into your collar. He stood on our porch in a coat too thin for the weather, thinner himself than I remembered, and said, "Dad, I know I don't deserve to ask, but I have nowhere else to go tonight." I stood in the doorway, the porch light yellow over both of us, and felt, for one honest second, 34 years of being his father pulling at my chest. "You have somewhere to go, Derek," I said, and I kept my voice level, the way I had all along. "It's just not here. Not tonight. Not until you've spent as much effort making this right as you spent explaining why it was fine." He nodded, once, like he'd expected the answer and hated that he'd hoped anyway. I closed the door, not hard, not a slam, just firm, and stood there a moment with my palm flat against the wood. Margaret was in the kitchen, 2 cups of tea already made, like she'd known. "You okay?" she asked. "I understand liens very well now," I said, and she laughed, really laughed, the first easy laugh either of us had had in months. And for the first time since that grip on my wrist at the housewarming, the house felt like ours again. Here's what 31 years of business and one very expensive family lesson taught me. Love your children fiercely, but never confuse family for a reason to skip the paperwork. The people who tell you documentation is unnecessary because we're family are very often the same people counting on you never reading the fine print. If you were in my position, would you have torn up that memo at the dinner table or waited for a quieter moment? Tell me in the comments what you would have done differently. And if you want more stories like this one, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.